Hey guys, tonight we travel back to feudal Japan, not to a serene Zen garden or the pristine corridors of a shogun's palace, but to the mud-drenched, chaotic and frankly, quite smelly world of a samurai army on the march. We'll be stepping into the geta sandals of a warrior, but we're not focusing on the clashing of swords or the heroic last stands. Instead, we're peeling back the lacquered armor to reveal the grimy, unglamorous, and often stomach-churning reality of daily life and hygiene on the battlefield. The image you have in your head of the stoic, impeccably dressed warrior is about to get a serious reality check. You probably once survived this, not from a katana, but from a simple infection you got from trying to clean your rice bowl. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always nice to know you're out there, so feel free to drop your location and what time it is for you in those comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight, but the smell. It's a thick, complex bouquet, a miasma that clings to the damp air. There's the sour tang of unwashed bodies, thousands of them, packed close together. Underneath it is the sharp, ammonia-like odor of horse urine and manure, churned into the mud by countless hooves and sandals. And woven through it all is the damp, earthy smell of the ground itself, a sodden, trampled field that has given up trying to be anything other than a basin for filth. You pictured banners snapping crisply in the wind, the glint of sun on polished steel. What you get is a low-hanging fog of human and animal smells, so pervasive you can taste it on the back of your tongue. You stand on the edge of the encampment, a sprawling, chaotic city of wood, fabric, and flesh that has sprung up seemingly overnight. This isn't the orderly, geometric camp of a Roman legion. It's an organic growth, a messy expression of necessity. Straw-thatched huts and simple lean-tos are crammed together, their proximity dictated more by social standing than by any grand strategic plan. The samurai, men of your station, have slightly better accommodations, perhaps a small tent or a more sturdily built hut, but you're still cheek by jowl with hundreds of others. The real bulk of the army, the ashigaru or foot soldiers, make do with even less, sometimes just a patch of muddy ground and a straw cloak to keep off the worst of the rain. Your armor, a beautiful work of art lacquered in your clan's colours, already feels like a lie. It was so pristine this morning. Now, the greaves are splattered with a dark, unidentifiable muck, and the silken cords that bind the plates are starting to feel damp and gritty. You look around at your comrades and see the same story. The gilded illusion of the warrior class is breaking apart with every step into this mire. A nearby samurai, a man you recognize from the Lord's castle, is meticulously cleaning his helmet with a cloth, yet the hem of his expensive silk hakama is stained dark with mud and something worse. It's a perfect little snapshot of the losing battle you're all fighting against the grime. Historians still argue whether the strict codes of honor, which dictated so much of a samurai's life, extended in any meaningful way to the day-to-day, camp discipline of the common soldier. From where you're standing, the answer seems pretty clear. While the samurai might maintain a veneer of personal dignity, the collective environment is one of managed chaos at best. There's a constant, low roar of activity. Men are shouting, hammering wooden stakes, tending to horses, and arguing over a game of dice. It's a far cry from the silent, meditative warrior you've seen in woodblock prints. It's more like a massive, poorly organized construction site where everyone is armed. Only rule that seems to be universally followed is that everything, eventually, gets thrown onto the ground. You see discarded food scraps, bits of straw, and broken pieces of pottery littering the pathways. There's no designated trash collection. The camp's floor is the camp's landfill. This casual disposal of waste is a visual problem, but you have a sinking feeling it's going to become a much bigger issue. For now, you just try to watch your step. You came here to prove your valor and honor, not to twist your ankle on a discarded piece of dried radish. A mainstream historical fact is that these armies were massive logistical undertakings, requiring tons of supplies. What's less discussed is the logistical nightmare of the waste they produced. As you venture deeper, seeking out the banner of your particular commander, you notice the little, personal details that clash so sharply with the squalor. You see a man carefully sharpening his sword, its edge gleaming in the fading light. A short distance away, another writes in a small book, his ink stone and brush laid out on a simple wooden box. It's a quirky tidbit of samurai life that even on campaign, many carried tools for calligraphy and poetry, and need to capture a moment of beauty or compose a death poem, even while sitting in a sea of mud. It's a profound contrast, the desire for artistic expression and honor existing right alongside a complete disregard for the most basic sanitation. This dedication to the blade and the brush, but not the bath, is a paradox you'll be living in for the foreseeable future. The camp is a living, breathing, and very, very dirty organism, and you've just been swallowed by it. The initial shock of the camp's scent and appearance begins to subside, replaced by a more pressing, personal need. A deep, rasping thirst is building in your throat. The small bamboo flask you carry, filled hours ago from a crisp mountain spring, is now frustratingly empty. The long march has baked this moisture out of you, and the dusty, smoky air only makes it worse. Your tongue feels thick, and your thoughts, which should be on your duties and your commander, are narrowing to a single primal focus: water. You need to find the camp's water source, and you need to find it now. It's the one resource more critical than arrows or rice, the lifeblood of this temporary city. You ask a passing foot soldier, his face streaked with dirt, where to get a drink. He gestures vaguely with a flick of his head towards the edge of the encampment, a gesture that seems to say, "Where do you think?" Following his implied direction, you begin to notice a pattern. More men are walking in the same general direction, carrying everything from lacquered wooden buckets to simple clay pots. The ground here slopes gently downward, and the path becomes progressively muddier, the squelching sound under your sandals a constant companion. The murmur of the camp gives way to a new sound, the gurgle and splash of a river. Relief floods through you, a cool wave of anticipation. But that relief is short-lived. As you break through the final line of makeshift tents, you see it. The river is not the clear, fast-flowing stream you had imagined. It's a sluggish, brown artery, its banks thoroughly trampled into a muddy wasteland. And it is crowded. The scene before you is one of communal, multi-purpose use that makes your stomach clench. A little way upstream, a group of men are washing their clothes, or rather, beating the dirt out of them against the rocks, sending clouds of silt blooming into the current. Just beside them, another man is scrubbing a horse, the animal nonchalantly relieving itself into the very water he's using. Your eyes follow the flow downstream, and the picture only gets worse. Men are bathing, such as it is, splashing the murky water over their heads and chests. Their grimy bodies and sweat are simply added to the mix. One man is even cleaning a fish, tossing the guts into this current with a casual flick of his wrist. And then you see the drinkers. They are everywhere along the bank, dipping their containers into the same water, just a few feet away from the washing and the animal waste. The foot soldiers, the ashigaru, are clustered at the most accessible and therefore most downstream points. They scoop up the water without a moment's hesitation, gulping it down as if it were the finest sake. You, as a samurai, have the unspoken privilege of moving further upstream, a small nod to your status. It's a major advantage. You walk past the horse washing station, past the laundry detail, until you find a slightly less congested spot. The water here is still brown, still filled with floating specks of who knows what, but at least you didn't just watch a horse do its business in it 2 minutes ago. Small victories. You unsling your gourd, your throat now screaming for liquid. You hesitate. Every instinct, every modern sensibility you don't even know you possess, is screaming no. But the warrior next to you, a veteran by the looks of his scarred helmet, simply fills his own flask, adds a few dried plum pits to it, and drinks deeply. This is a quirky, common practice. Boshi, or pickled plum, was not only a part of the diet, but was also believed to have purifying properties. You watch him, hoping the folk wisdom is true. Does he know something you don't? Or has he just been lucky for this long? There's a joke among the soldiers that you need guts of steel to be in an army, and you're beginning to realize that wasn't just a metaphor for courage. Historians still argue whether commanders of this era truly understood the connection between foul water and the devastating outbreaks of disease that so often crippled their armies. While the full germ theory was centuries away, some military manuals do advise camping upstream from any potential enemy and ensuring latrines are dug far from the water supply. But the gap between theory and practice is as wide as this muddy river. The sheer logistical challenge of providing clean water for an army of 10, 20 or even 50,000 men was often simply insurmountable. Sickness was attributed to bad air, spiritual imbalance, or just the will of the gods. You have no other choice. You dip your own gourd into the river, trying to scoop from the clearest looking patch you can find. The water that fills it is cool, but opaque. You can see tiny particles suspended within it. You pull out a small cloth, a token effort, and try to strain the water through it as you pour it into your flask. The cloth comes away with a brownish residue. It's not exactly a state-of-the-art filtration system. You raise the flask to your lips, take a deep breath, and drink. The taste is earthy and gritty. A mainstream historical fact of pre-modern warfare is that more soldiers died from disease than from direct combat, and dysentery, the bloody flux, was the chief culprit. This single, necessary swallow of water is statistically more dangerous than the battle you are marching towards. As the water sloshes in your stomach, you feel a temporary relief from your thirst, but it's replaced by a cold knot of anxiety. You've just taken your first real gamble of the campaign, and the opponent wasn't another warrior with a sword, but an invisible army of pathogens in a simple drink of water. Looking at the river again, you see it for what it is, not just a source of life, but a conveyor belt of potential sickness, connecting every single man in the camp in a shared, vulnerable ecosystem. You've quenched your thirst, but you've also just introduced a ticking clock into your own body. The battle for Japan can wait. The battle within your own intestines may have just begun. The earthy taste of the river water still coats your tongue, a gritty reminder of your recent gamble. That churning knot of anxiety in your gut has been joined by a different, more familiar sensation: hunger. It's a hollow ache that has been growing steadily since midday. The sun is sinking lower, painting the undersides of the clouds in shades of orange and purple, and with the coming of dusk, the camp begins to shift its focus from marching and fortification to the evening meal. The scent of wood smoke, once just a part of the general camp aroma, now sharpens, becoming more distinct as hundreds of small cooking fires are coaxed to life. Your stomach rumbles in response, a sound that is both hopeful and, given your recent drink, slightly ominous. You make your way to the supply lines, where the quartermasters are overseeing the distribution of rations. There's a semblance of order here, a long queue of foot soldiers with their simple cloth bags held open. As a samurai, you don't have to wait in the main line. You head to a smaller, less crowded area designated for warriors of your rank. It's another small privilege, but one that doesn't change the fundamental nature of what you're about to receive. A man with a ledger ticks off your name and hands you your portion, a measure of uncooked rice in a small straw sack, and a couple of lumpy, dark brown balls. This is it. This is your fuel for the night and the coming day. The main component, of course, is the rice. This is the cornerstone of the Japanese diet and the absolute bedrock of military logistics. The mainstream historical fact is that a samurai's wealth and a lord's power were measured in koku, a unit of rice, supposedly enough to feed one man for 1 year. Now, that abstract unit of currency has become your very concrete, very necessary dinner. Sometimes on a fast march, you might be issued hoshi as sehen, which is precooked and then dried rice that can be eaten as is a crunchy, jaw-aching experience rehydrated in water or soup. Tonight, however, it's raw rice, meaning you have to cook it yourself. The lumpy brown balls are miso dama, hardened spheres of fermented soybean paste, often mixed with other ingredients like ground barley or chopped vegetables. You can just gnaw on one if you're desperate, but their intended use is to be dissolved in hot water to create a soup. It's your primary source of salt and flavour, the only thing that will make the mountain of bland rice palatable. Accompanying this is a small, wrinkled, and intensely sour pickled plum, the umeboshi you saw the veteran add to his water. It's meant to aid digestion and, according to popular belief, ward off fatigue. You pocket it like a precious jewel. Finding a spot near a communal fire, you join a small group of samurai from your unit. The mood is subdued. No one is telling grand stories. The focus is entirely on the task at hand. You pull out your personal iron pot, a small but heavy piece of kit, and portion out some of your rice and wateries, the same gritty river water from before. The thought of boiling it offers some small comfort. At least it'll be hot grit. As the pot sits precariously on the edge of this fire, you watch other soldiers. Some are getting creative. A quirky tidbit of campaign life is the use of hroku, a type of flat, unglazed ceramic dish. Men would place these directly on the embers to parch rice or toast beans, giving them a slightly different texture and a nutty flavour. It's a small act of culinary defiance against the monotony. You make a mental note to try and trade for one later. As your rice boils, you inspect the remaining grains in your bag. You spot a couple of tiny black specks moving. Weevils. A common, unwelcome addition to any stored grain. You sigh and flick them out. It's a joke as old as armies themselves, just a little extra protein. But the threat of spoilage is no laughing matter. Rice could go mouldy, especially in the damp conditions of a long campaign, and eating spoiled food was a surefire way to get violently ill. The same goes for the other media rations. That bit of dried fish you might be issued could be rock hard and caked in salt, or it could be soft and smell just a little bit off. Every meal is a small risk assessment. Historians still debate the overall nutritional adequacy of the standard samurai campaign diet. While rice provided carbohydrates for energy, the diet was perilously low in certain vitamins and proteins. Over a long siege or campaign, this could lead to conditions like night blindness or beriberi, a debilitating nerve disease caused by a thiamine deficiency, which they would have simply called Edo sickness or a weakness of the legs. The reliance on foraging and, let's be blunt, plundering from the local peasantry was not just about supplementing calories, but about a desperate, unconscious search for nutrients not found in the ration bags. Finally, your rice is cooked. It's more of a sticky, starky paste than the fluffy grains you're used to. You drop a piece of your miso ball into your lacquered wooden bowl, add some hot water, and stir until it dissolves into a cloudy, salty broth. You then pour this over your rice. This is your meal, a greyish-brown gruel with the sharp, sour punctuation of the occasional bite of pickled plum. You eat it with your chopsticks, your movements efficient and practiced. The taste is functional. It's hot, it's salty, and it's filling a hole. It is also profoundly boring. It's the kind of meal that makes you forget you even have taste buds. You look over at your commander, who is eating the exact same thing. In this, at least, there is a strange sort of equality. The misery is shared. Your hunger is abated, but there is no satisfaction, only a temporary truce. You are fueled, not fed, and the memory of that rich, flavorful stew you had at a roadside inn a week ago feels like a story from another man's life. The salty, lukewarm miso soup and the starky mass of rice are now sitting heavily in your gut. That gritty water you drank is working its way through your system, and soon, an undeniable, biological urgency begins to override all other thoughts. It's a call of nature that cannot be ignored, even in the middle of a military campaign. There are no convenient signposts, no designated facilities marked for your comfort. You have to find the latrine area, and experience has already taught you that the best way to locate such a place is not with your eyes, but with your nose. You rise from the fireside, offer a slight nod to your comrades who understand your mission without a word, and begin your perilous journey. You walk towards the edge of the camp, heading in what you hope is a downwind direction. The logic is simple. No commander, no matter how incompetent, would want the latrine pits upwind of his own tent. As you move away from the central cluster of huts and fires, the ground becomes less trodden and more treacherous. You navigate by the dim light of the moon and the distant glow of the camp, stepping carefully to avoid ankle-twisting roots and discarded debris. The general hum of the army fades behind you, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. And then, the smell hits you. It arrives before you see anything, a potent wall of odor so foul it makes the earlier camp smells seem like a sweet perfume. It's a thick, cloying stench of ammonia and decay that catches in the back of your throat and makes your eyes water. You've found it. The latrine is not a building. It is a series of long, deep trenches dug into the earth, known as samputan. A mainstream historical fact of Japanese camp life, these communal pits were the standard solution for dealing with the waste of thousands of men. There's no structure, no roof, no privacy screens. Along the edge of some trenches, a felled log has been placed, offering a precarious spot to balance. Others have nothing at all, just the crumbling, muddy edge of the pit. Men from all ranks are here, their shapes made anonymous by the gloom. You see the silhouette of a lowly foot soldier, not far from a man, whose helmet crest marks him as a samurai of some standing. In this place, all men are unceremoniously equalized, their social status temporarily suspended by a shared, humbling need. Your fine armor, a symbol of your station and your protection in battle, is now a clumsy, infuriating obstacle. You have to carefully untee the cords of your thigh guards and remove the lower sections of your cuirass just to manage the task, all while trying to keep your balance on the slick, contaminated ground near the edge of the pit. The air is thick with flies, a buzzing, persistent cloud that you wave away from your face. A single slip could be disastrous, not just embarrassing, but potentially deadly. To fall into that pit would be a fate worse than any sword wound, a death by filth and infection that would be whispered as a cautionary tale for years. You find a relatively unoccupied spot along one of the logs, your sandals sinking into the soft, damp earth. You do your business as quickly as possible, averting your eyes and trying to breathe through your mouth. The sheer scale of the waste is staggering, a testament to the biological reality of an army. Cleanliness, in the traditional sense, is an impossible luxury. There is no paper, no water for washing. The quirky tidbit of Japanese hygiene in this era is the chijai, a small wooden stick or spatula used for personal cleaning, after which it would be discarded. In its absence, handfuls of leaves, grass or smooth stones are the only option. It's a crude, unsatisfying process that leaves you feeling profoundly unclean. Historians still argue how much strategic thought was truly put into the placement and management of these latrines. While some military chronicles, like the Chigodake, contain explicit instructions to dig pits downwind and to cover them with fresh earth daily to control the smell and the spread of disease, the archaeological evidence from campaign sites is often ambiguous. In the chaos of a rapid advance or a hastily established siege line, these sanitary ideals were likely one of the first casualties of expediency. The trenches were dug where it was convenient, and they were covered over only when they became so full as to be unusable. The risk of disease spreading from these open sewers was immense, a fact they may have dimly understood without knowing the precise mechanism. As you retire your armor, your fingers fumbling with the silken cords, you feel a sense of grim relief mixed with utter revulsion. You've survived your pit stop. You turn your back on the trench and its attendant horrors, and begin the walk back toward the relative comfort of the campfire. But the smell clings to you, a ghostly miasma that seems to have soaked into your clothes and hair. You know it's probably just in your mind, but you can't shake the feeling of being contaminated. Back in your small space, you lay out your sleeping mat, a thin layer of straw between you and the cold ground. You are exhausted from the day's march, your muscles ache, and your mind should be shutting down. But sleep is slow to come. Every time you close your eyes, the image of that dark, yawning trench returns, and the foul odor seems to bloom anew in your memory. It's a stark reminder that the threats in this war are not just in front of you on the battlefield, but all around you, even under your feet. You finally drift into a shallow, fitful sleep, your mind a swirl of muddy rivers and foul-smelling trenches. But the quiet of the night is torn open by a sudden, sharp cry of pain, followed by a flurry of low, urgent voices from a nearby hut. It's not the sound of an alarm or an attack, but something smaller, more personal. Your training and instinct pull you from your mat in an instant, your hand reflexively going to the hilt of your short sword. You creep toward the noise, your senses on high alert. Peering around the edge of a straw-thatched lean-to, you see a small group of men gathered around, a single flickering lantern. It's not an assassin in the dark. The victim is one of your own men, a young samurai named Kenji. He's sitting on the ground, his face pale in the lantern light, cradling his forearm. In the chaos of the darkened camp, he had tripped over a carelessly placed tether stake for a horse and in falling, had sliced his arm open on the sharp edge of an unused armor plate lying on the ground. It's not a glorious wound from a rival clan's blade, it's a stupid, clumsy injury born from the camp's own disorder. The deep, ragged gash weeps blood, the dark fluid already mixing with the dirt on his skin. An older soldier, a man named Hideo who has seen more campaigns than anyone else in your unit, kneels beside him. Hideo is the de facto medic, not because he has any formal training, but because he's managed to survive for 30 years and has picked up the crude battlefield arts of patching men up. He examines the wound with a practiced eye, his expression grim. He calls. The sake, and a flask is quickly produced. You feel a brief, absurd flicker of hope. Alcohol. A cleanser. Maybe they understand more than you thought. But your hope deflates as Hideo takes a quick swig from the flask himself before pouring a small amount onto a piece of cloth he just pulled from his own grimy waistband. It's less a sterilization procedure and more like a perfunctory rinse. This isn't about killing germs. It's about washing away the visible dirt. Next, Hideo begins preparing the treatment. He doesn't pull out a neat medical kit. He scrapes some black, flaky material from the inside of a cooking pot. ash. He mixes this with something he has been chewing, a wad of green leaves he pulls from his own mouth, creating a dark, wet poultice in the palm of his hand. It looks less like a medical preparation and more like his seasoning a piece of meat for the grill. This is a mainstream historical fact of field medicine from the era. Ash or charcoal was commonly used to pack wounds, valued for its ability to stop bleeding and absorb fluid. The chewed herbs are a folk remedy, a specific plant he swears by, passed down from his grandfather. No one asks what the plant is. They just trust the tradition. He then slaps this crude paste directly into the open wound. Kenji hisses in pain, his knuckles white as he clenches his fist. Ido works the mixture into the gash with his thumb, ensuring it's packed deep. The bleeding slows, the black paste absorbing the blood. To you, it looks like he is deliberately packing filth into an open injury. It's a terrifying sight. The quirky tidbit here is that while this seems barbaric, some folk remedies did, by pure chance, contain ingredients with antiseptic properties. Moles found on rice, for instance, were sometimes used in poultices, a bizarre and accidental precursor to the discovery of penicillin. Whether Hideo's mystery leaf mash is helpful or harmful is anyone's guess. It's a roll of the dice with a young man's. Why? Hideo finishes his work by taking the sake-dampened rag and binding it tightly around the arm, securing the poultice. The bandage is already turning a muddy brown. He pats Kenji on the shoulder, mutters something about not tripping over his own feet next time, and the procedure is over. The young samurai is left to sit in the dark, his fate now sealed not by the sharpness of the metal that cut him, but by the unseen battle that will take place within his own flesh. Historians still argue whether the perceived success of certain traditional remedies was due to genuine medicinal properties or simply the patient's own robust constitution surviving in spite of the treatment. For every story of a miraculous recovery, there were likely dozens of unrecorded deaths, from sepsis, the body simply overwhelmed by infection introduced by the very cure meant to save it. You walk back to your sleeping mat, the image of that black paste being pushed into the wound burned into your mind. And insidious fear begins to creep into your heart. A fear far more personal than the abstract terror of battle. The clean, swift death of a sword stroke suddenly seems merciful. It's the lingering, ignoble death that frightens you, a death from 1,000 tiny cuts, from a festering wound that starts with a simple stumble in the dark. You instinctively run your hands over your own arms and legs, suddenly hyper-aware of the small scratches and nicks you've accumulated over the past few days. Each one now seems like a tiny, open door, an invitation for the grime of this world to come flooding in. You lie down, but sleep is even further away now. You are a warrior, trained to face down-armed men, but you have no defense against this enemy, the one that is too small to see and is already everywhere. The grey light of dawn filters through the straw walls of your hut, bringing with it a new tension. The low hum of the camp has changed. The sluggish, weary drone of the evening has been replaced by a sharper, more energetic buzz. An order has come down the chain of command, passed from the general's tent to the unit commanders and now whispered among the men like a rustling wind. We make for the enemy today. Battle is no longer a distant destination at the end of a long march. It is a few short hours away. Before you even think of your sword or your spear, you check on Kenji. He is not doing well. A fever flush colours his cheeks, and a sheen of sweat glistens on his brow, despite the morning chill. The wound on his arm, beneath its crude bandage of ash and rag, looks angry and swollen. The quick, clumsy injury has become a quiet, insidious siege against his body, a battle he is already starting to lose. Your commander gathers your unit. His instructions are brief and to the point. There will be a short, final meal, and then all men are to perform the necessary preparations. And the first preparation, before a single plate of armor is polished or a sword is inspected, is purification. It seems like a grand contradiction. How can one become clean in a world made of mud and waste? But this isn't about physical hygiene. It's something else entirely, a ritual to prepare the spirit, not the body, for what is to come. You see men moving with a solemn purpose, retrieving small wooden buckets and clay bowls. They head, once again, to that same beleaguered river, the source of all your camp's life and potential death. You watch them, then follow suit. You retrieve your own eating bowl, carefully rinsing out the last of the morning's rice gruel. At the riverbank, you find a space and dip your bowl into the current, collecting a small amount of the murky water. You carry it back to your small space as if it were a sacred offering. A mainstream historical fact is that Shinto, the indigenous faith of Japan, is deeply concerned with concepts of purity and pollution. Blood, death, and decay create a state of kage, or spiritual pollution, which must be cleansed through ritual. For a warrior heading into a battle where all three were guaranteed, a preemptive spiritual rinse was considered essential. Back at your spot, the ritual begins. It is quiet and intensely personal. You see men around you doing the same. First, you pour a little water into your left hand and wash your right. Then, you pour water into your right hand and wash your left. You are not scrubbing, you are performing a symbolic act. Finally, you pour a little more water into your cupped hand, bring it to your mouth, and rinse. You swish the gritty water around before spitting it onto the ground. Spiritually cleansed, bacteriologically compromised. It's a perfect metaphor for your existence here. Some men, in a quirky tidbit of ritual practice, add a pinch of precious salt to their water, as salt is a powerful purifying agent in Shinto tradition, used by priests to cleanse grounds and by sumo wrestlers before a bout. It's a tiny, expensive gesture that speaks volumes about the fears on their minds. You also take a moment to attend to your hair. Your top knot, your chomage, is a symbol of your samurai status. Letting it become unkempt is a sign of disgrace. You carefully untie it, and using a simple wooden comb and a little bit of camellia oil from a tiny vial, you work to smooth it back into its proper shape. It's a frustrating, meticulous process. Trying to achieve a perfect, dignified hairstyle while sitting in the dirt next to a man whose arm is actively rotting feels like a special kind of madness. Priorities, you suppose. Historians still argue whether these purification rituals were performed out of genuine piety, or if they served primarily as a psychological tool. Was it a deeply felt need to appear before the gods in a state of purity, or was it a practical method for calming the nerves, a familiar ritual that focused the mind and prepared a man for the terrifying chaos of combat? Perhaps the answer is that it was both, the belief and the benefit, woven so tightly together they couldn't be separated. The act itself brought a sense of control in a situation where you had very little. Once the purification is complete, the mood shifts, the quiet introspection is over. Now begins the grim business of arming. You stand up, feeling spiritually refreshed, but physically just as grimy as you were 10 minutes ago. You reach for your do, the cuirass of your armor, which has been leaning against your pack. The lacquered plates are smeared with mud, and the silk cords are stiff with old sweat and dirt. As you lift it, a faint, sour smell rises from it, the accumulated odor of days of marching and sleeping in the filth. You have just rinsed your mouth to purify your soul for the gods, and now you are about to encase your body in a shell of well-crafted, expensive, and profoundly smelly grime. The contrast is jarring. You look at your helmet, a beautiful piece, with a fearsome crest. You know that within an hour of wearing it, it will be a hot, dark bucket, your own sweat mingling with the old sweat already soaked into the lining. This is the grime before the storm, the accepted layer of filth that you will carry with you into the fury. You are a statue of lacquered steel and silk, standing in the morning light. Your armor is a second skin, heavy and familiar. Your helmet is on, its weight settling onto your shoulders, narrowing your vision to a focused slit. The spiritual rinse is a fading memory, the pre-battle meal a distant necessity. Now, there is only the waiting. The army is a vast, coiled spring, and you are one small part of its tension. Your commander is mounted, his banner held high, a splash of colour against the green landscape. You can feel the nervous energy rippling through the ranks, a collective intake of breath. And then, you feel something else. It starts as a tiny, prickling sensation in the small of your back, right in the one place you could not possibly reach even if you were wearing a simple bimoo. You try to ignore it. It's just a stray fibre, a crease in your undergarment. But the itch doesn't fade. It intensifies, a focused point of irritation that drills into your consciousness. You subtly try to shift your torso, grinding your back against the inner plate of your cuirass. It provides no relief. In fact, the movement seems to wake up its friends. Another itch blooms on your scalp, deep under your carefully oiled top knot. A third appears on your ribs, under your arm. It's not just a random irritation. It's a dawning, crawling horror. You are not alone in your armor. You have guests. The ice. Fleas. A tiny, unseen army that has set up its own campaign headquarters in the seams of your clothing and the padding of your armor. The heat your body is generating inside this metal shell, amplified by the morning sun, has created the perfect, humid environment for them to thrive. It's their own personal tropical paradise, and you are the island. This is a miserable, mainstream, historical fact of nearly every pre-modern army on Earth. They were crawling with parasites. From Roman legionaries to European knights, the close quarters, infrequent washing and shared bedding of military life made infestations of body lice a universal torment. It was not just an annoyance. Lice are carriers of diseases like typhus, the dreaded camp fever that could decimate an army more effectively than any enemy general. You glance at the man standing next to you. He is staring stoically forward, the picture of disciplined readiness. But you see it. A slight, almost imperceptible twitch of his neck muscles. A quick, hard shrug of one shoulder, as if trying to dislodge something. It's the samurai twitch, an involuntary dance that is being performed up and down the ranks. It's a shared secret, a universal misery that no one dares acknowledge openly. To complain would be a sign of weakness, a distraction from the warrior's purpose. And so, you all stand there, itching, united in a silent, maddening battle against an enemy you can't see or strike. A ridiculous thought flits through your mind. Maybe these lice have their own clan colours and tiny, invisible banners. It's a delirious little joke that you don't dare share. Deep within your armour, tucked into a small pouch, you have a few shavings of camphor wood. It's a quirky tidbit of folk belief that the strong-smelling wood repels insects. You put them there this morning with a sliver of hope. Right now, it feels about as effective as trying to stop a tidal wave with a single reed mat. Perhaps it's just making them angry. You see another soldier discreetly trying to ram the butt of his spear shaft under his armpit to scratch. It's a clumsy, desperate move that speaks of profound irritation. Historians still argue whether the constant torment of parasites was seen as a simple fact of life, like rain or mud, or if it was viewed as a genuine dishonour, a sign that a warrior's personal discipline was failing. Phew. The emphasis on purity you witnessed just hours ago, the idea that your body is a crawling ecosystem of filth must create a deep, cognitive dissonance. How can you be spiritually pure for the gods when your physical form is a feast for vermin? Suddenly, a deep, resonant boom echoes across the field. A war drum. Then another. The signal. The march begins. You lurch forward, your legs feeling stiff under the weight of your armour. And with every step, it gets worse. The plates of your armour rub against your undergarments, the friction a constant stimulation for the crawling things beneath. The rhythmic jostling of the march feels like they are being gently rocked in their hammocks. Your own sweat, now starting to bead on your forehead and trickle down your back, is a salty feast for them. The itch is no longer a series of points. It's a full-body crawling sensation, a psychological torture that is starting to eclipse your fear of the enemy. You think you might actually go mad. If the enemy charged right now and saw thousands of samurai frantically twitching and writhing in their armour, they might just assume it's some terrifying new war dance and flee in confusion. But then, as you crest a small hill, you see them. The enemy army spread across the valley below. A forest of banners and spears. The sight is a shock of cold water. The distant, abstract idea of battle is now a very real, very sharp reality. And in that instant, a strange thing happens. The itching doesn't vanish, but it recedes. It's forced into the background of your mind, a buzzing static beneath the sudden, blaring trumpet of mortal terror and adrenaline. The crawling on your skin is still there, but the crawling fear in your gut is now infinitely more powerful. You have a new itch to scratch, and it can only be satisfied with the point of a spear. The rush of adrenaline is a powerful, fleeting thing. For a heart-stopping moment, the sight of the enemy army erases everything else as mud. There's hunger, the maddening itch crawling over your skin. Your entire being narrows to a single point of violent purpose. But the charge doesn't come. Your commander doesn't give the signal. The enemy general, it seems, is equally cautious. The two armies stand like magnificent, deadly sculptures, observing each other across the Valley of Decision. Hours pass. The sun climbs to its zenith, beating down on your helmet. The initial, sharp-edged fear dulls into a weary, anxious stalemate, and as the adrenaline drains away, the lesser miseries of your existence come flooding back in. The itch returns with a vengeance. The stalemate holds for the rest of the day, and then another. Your camp, which was a temporary stop, becomes a semi-permanent one. This is a disastrous development. A moving army leaves some of its filth behind. A stationary army stews in it. The latrine trenches, already overflowing, become unspeakable. The river, your only source of water, grows murkier by the hour. The ground becomes a universal crash heap. And in this fertile, festering environment, the unseen enemy begins its real work. It doesn't use spears or arrows. It spreads through a shared sip from a water flask, through the bite of a louse, through the cough of the man sleeping next to you. The first sign is the sound. At night, the camp is filled with a chorus of hacking coughs, wet and ragged. During the day, you see more and more men making their way, with a particular, desperate urgency, toward the latrine pits. They are suffering from the bloody flux, or dysentery, an intestinal inflammation that turns a man's insides to water and fire. This is the great killer of armies, the true captain of all the men of death. The mainstream historical fact is that in almost any pre-modern military campaign, diseases like dysentery, typhoid and smallpox would claim vastly more lives than combat. This enemy doesn't care about your rank or your skill with a sword. It is ruthlessly democratic. You go to check on Kenji, the young samurai who fell and cut his arm. His makeshift hut smells of sickness and sweat. The wound itself is a horror. The flesh around it is swollen, purple, and hot to the touch, with angry red streaks running up his arm toward his shoulder, a sign the poison is spreading. His fever is raging, his delirious, muttering about his home, his eyes unfocused. Idio, the old soldier who treated him, stands by looking helpless. His ash and herb poultice, his traditional wisdom, has failed completely. Sepsis has taken hold, and there is nothing anyone can do but wait for the inevitable. Kenji will not die from an enemy blade, but from a random piece of metal and the dirt on the ground. His death will not be recorded in a heroic epic. He will just be another casualty of the campaign itself. Fear begins to spread faster than any rumor from the scouts. It's a quiet, gnawing fear, different from the fear of battle. You see men starting to edge away from those who cough too. Watch. You see them watching the men who have the flux. Their faces a mixture of pity and dread. The quirky tidbit of the era's medical understanding is that many believe this sickness is not a physical ailment, but a spiritual one. They call it Jacka-malevolent Kai, or bad air. They believe it rises from the earth, especially on battlefields or places where many people are crowded together. Some soldiers clutch charms, small inscribed pieces of paper from a shrine or a slip of wood blessed by a priest, believing these will ward off the evil emanations. One man offers a fervent prayer every time he is forced to drink the river water. It feels like a futile gesture. Historians still debate to what extent Japanese commanders of the period understood the concept of contagion in a practical, if not scientific, sense. Military chronicles sometimes mention moving a camp because of unwholesome vapors or even isolating those with obvious, visible pestilence like smallpox, but this was likely a reaction to the sheer horror of the symptoms rather than a true grasp of germ theory. They would isolate the man covered in pustules but see no connection to the lice in his bedding, which might be carrying typhus to his neighbors. They might move the entire camp, but they would bring the contaminated water barrels, the infected lice, and the sick men with them. They were trying to flee a fire while carrying the embers in their pockets. The morale of the army begins to fray at the edges. A soldier weakened by hunger and tormented by lice can still fight. A soldier doubled over with stomach cramps, weak with fever, is useless. More than that, he is a terrifying omen to his comrades. The army, this fearsome weapon of your lord, is slowly rotting from the inside out. You look across the valley at the enemy camp. You have to assume they are suffering the same fate. This is not just a battle between two armies anymore. It is a race. Who will collapse from sickness first? It's the most absurd joke of all. The ultimate victor of this campaign might simply be the side with the last few healthy men left standing. The enemy in front of you is predictable. You know their weapons. You can see their banners. But this enemy is invisible. silent, and it is already inside the gates. It is sleeping in your hut, drinking from your bowl, and marching in your very own blood. The stalemate isn't just a military strategy anymore. It's a form of rot. With each passing day of inaction, the invisible enemy inside the camp walls grows bolder. The chorus of coughing at night gets louder, the lines for the latrine trenches longer and more desperate. And then, the inevitable happens. Engi dies. There is no final, dramatic monologue. There is no battlefield glory. He passes in the fetid heat of his hut, consumed by a fever that began with a stupid, simple cut. You hear the news from Hideo, the old soldier, whose face is a mask of weary resignation. His folk remedies, his confident pronouncements, have all amounted to nothing. He simply pulls the straw mat over the young man's face, and the story of Kenji is over. His death presents a new, grimly practical problem. What do you do with the body? It cannot stay here. Even without a modern understanding of germs, the primal concept of Kiga spiritual pollution is deeply ingrained in everyone. A dead body is the ultimate source of pollution, and its presence is a blight on the living, a stain on the camp's fortune. It must be removed. The task falls to a small group of the lowest-ranking Ashigaru, men whose luck has run out for the day. This isn't an honor guard. It's a sanitation detail. They arrive with a single woven straw mat and expressions of profound disinterest, their movements slow and grudging. This is probably the worst job in an army full of terrible jobs. A mainstream historical fact of the period is that while cremation was the preferred Buddhist funerary practice for most social classes in settled life, it was an almost impossible luxury on a military campaign. A full cremation requires a massive amount of firewood and a great deal of time, two resources that are in critically short supply. The grim reality for the common soldier, and often even for samurai when things got dire, was a simple, hasty burial. Enji, a samurai, is wrapped in the straw mat he died on, his limbs stiffening within its confines. It's a sad, lumpy parcel. Before they take him away, Hideo performs one last, small act of service. He uses his utility knife to cut a lock of Kenji's topknot, carefully wrapping the black hair in a small piece of paper he produces from within his armor. He also takes a small stone and clips one of the boy's fingernails, adding it to the tiny packet. This quirky tidbit is a profoundly human moment amid the squalor. This small packet is all that will remain of Kenji. If possible, it will be sent back to his family, a tangible piece of their son to be interred in their ancestral temple. They will mourn a hero who they believe fell in glorious battle, never knowing he was defeated by a piece of rusty metal and the camp's own filth. The body is now just waste to be disposed of. The lock of hair is the man's soul. The detail hauls the body away, their sandals squelching in the mud. You follow at a distance, drawn by a morbid curiosity. They don't go far, just to a fallow field on the downwind side of the encampment, a place already tacitly understood to be off limits. Here, two other men are digging. Their work is sloppy. The hole they are excavating is shockingly shallow, barely 3 feet deep. They complain about the rocky soil as they work. There is no ceremony, no chanted sutras from a Buddhist priest. Enji's body is unceremoniously rolled into the shallow depression. The diggers begin to shovel the earth back on top, the clods of dirt landing on the straw mat with a series of dull, final thuds. They don't even bother to form a proper mound. It's a half-hearted effort, just enough to cover the body from sight. You have a sinking feeling a heavy rain or a determined scavenger animal could easily undo their work. Enji is not the only one. Over the next few days, the burial detail becomes a regular sight. The trickle of death becomes a steady, quiet stream. The dysentery is taking its toll, and other fevers are burning their way through the ranks. That fallow field begins to fill up. More shallow graves pockmark the landscape, a new and terrible topography of loss. It is becoming a landscape of the lost. Historians still argue whether the traditional, class-based distinctions in funerary rites were maintained with any rigor during harsh campaigns. Did a dead samurai truly receive a better burial than a common foot soldier? Perhaps at first. Maybe his grave was a foot deeper, his body wrapped in silk instead of straw, a slightly longer prayer muttered over him. But as the bodies pile up, you suspect necessity grinds away all such distinctions. The sheer logistical burden of death reduces everyone to the same grim status, a problem to be solved with a shovel. You start to wonder if the ghosts of the Ashigo and the ghosts of the samurai are arguing in the afterlife about the quality of their respective burials. You walk back to the camp, the image of that growing field of disturbed earth seared into your mind. That place is a far more honest reflection of this campaign than the proud banners fluttering in the breeze. Your fear of battle, of a swift death on the end of a spear, seems almost quaint now. The odds of dying that way, you realize, are becoming smaller every day. The odds of ending up in that field, taken down by a sip of bad water or a fever from a louse bite, are growing exponentially. The stalemate, which once felt like a reprieve, now feels like a siege conducted by a far more patient and effective general named disease. The enemy army across the valley doesn't need to attack. They just need to wait. They are waiting for you to die. And as you sit, cleaning your armor and feeling the familiar itch of your tiny passengers, you realize, with a cold certainty, that you are all in a race to the grave. The waiting game finally breaks, but not with the thunder of 1,000 charging feet. Instead, it ends with a quiet, strategic withdrawal. One morning, you wake to find the enemy's banners across the valley are gone. They have pulled back, ceding the field and retreating into the stony embrace of their clan's fortress, a formidable castle perched on a nearby mountain. Your own army advances, not with the fiery passion of a chase, but with the slow, methodical pace of a predator settling in for a long meal. You march across the valley, past the ground where you expected to fight and die, and begin the arduous process of encircling the enemy's stronghold. You are no longer on a campaign, you are now at a siege. And all the horrors of your temporary camp are about to become permanent fixtures of your life. Your new home is a sprawling ring of huts, trenches and picket lines that snakes around the base of the castle mountain. At first, it feels like progress. You are taking the fight to the enemy. But as days bleed into weeks, a new, more profound kind of despair begins to set in. The camp is no longer a place you pass through. It is your entire world. The huts are built a little more sturdily, with more care given to roofing and walls. There's a grim sense of permanence to it all. And this is the problem. Your army is now a stationary city, and it has no sewers, no sanitation department, and no way to escape its own ever-growing mountain of waste. The water situation, already precarious, becomes a nightmare. The main river flows down from the mountain, originating within the castle's domain before reaching your siege lines. The enemy garrison upstream now uses it for their own washing, their own waste, their own dead. The water that reaches you is no longer just accidentally contaminated. It is potentially being deliberately fouled. Every drink is an act of faith and a potential act of war. Fights break out over access to smaller, cleaner-looking side streams. Getting water is no longer a chore, it's a tactical mission that can end in a skirmish. The latrine trenches are on a different scale of horror now. Before, they were a destination. Now, their stench is the atmosphere. The pits are deeper, longer, and always full. The prevailing wind carries their foul breath over the entire encampment, a constant, inescapable reminder of the biological reality of 10,000 men. You can't get away from it. It's the first thing you smell when you wake up, and the last thing you smell as you try to fall asleep. Sometimes, you think the castle walls aren't keeping the enemy in, they are keeping the smell out. A miserable joke makes the rounds. The siege will be over when the garrison surrenders. Not to your spears, but to your stench. A mainstream, historical fact of Japanese warfare is that direct assaults on well-defended castles were incredibly bloody and often failed. The preferred method was Hiro's aim, a starvation siege. You surround the castle, cut off its supply lines, and simply wait for the food and the will to fight to run out. This is a battle of logistics and patience. But in choosing this strategy, your lord has condemned his own army to live in this squalor for months, perhaps even a year. You are trying to starve them out, but you are living in a petri dish. As the weeks wear on, the ground itself changes. It becomes a thick, archaeological layer cake of filth. Discarded food, straw bedding, broken tools, animal droppings and the constant churn of thousands of feet create a solid, stinking mire that seems to have no bottom. When it rains, the camp becomes a sewage pond. When it's dry, the filth turns to a fine, foul-smelling dust that gets into your eyes, your food and your lungs. A quirky tidbit of siege life is the emergence of a camp economy. Merchants, brave or foolish, arrive from nearby towns, setting up stalls to sell overpriced vegetables, salt, keepsake and talismans against sickness. A whole, wretched city springs up, with its own commerce and social life, all built upon a literal foundation of garbage. You watch the discipline that held the camp together begin to fray, and then snap. Men become sullen and listless. The pre-battle tension is gone, replaced by a suffocating boredom and a deep, grinding misery. Historians still argue whether the prolonged nature of a siege led to better organized sanitation out of a dawning realization of its importance, or if morale collapsed so completely that all attempts at discipline dissolved. From what you see, it's clearly the latter. Men stop going to the designated latrine trenches, preferring the convenience of a nearby ditch. Trash is thrown right outside the hut door. The distinction between living space and waste space vanishes. Whole camp is becoming one giant latrine. You spend your days practicing sword forms, mending your gear, playing gambling games with dried beans for steaks, and trying to ignore the ever-present stench. You stare up at the castle walls, a symbol of your purpose here. But the walls seem to mock you. The enemy is trapped in there, yes, but you are trapped out here. They are surrounded by stone walls, you are surrounded by your own filth. The siege has become a contest of endurance, a gruesome competition to see which enclosed community rots first. The real siege weapon isn't the catapults being built or the siege towers being assembled. It's the stench, the sickness, the sheer oppressive weight of living day after day in a world that is actively trying to poison you. You are both besieger and besieged, held captive by the very ground beneath your feet. The siege grinds on, a monotonous cycle of dirty dawns and foul-smelling dusks. The initial sicknesses like dysentery have become a chronic background hum in the camp, but new ailments begin to appear. Men complain of aching joints, of teeth loosening in their gums, of a profound weakness that no amount of sleep can cure. A strange rash appears on the skin of some soldiers, angry and red. Your diet of boiled rice, miso paste, and the occasional piece of heavily salted fish is taking its toll. The lack of fresh vegetables and fruit is leading to scurvy and other vitamin deficiencies, diseases you have no names for, only symptoms. You yourself feel a constant, bone-deep weariness, a lethargy that has nothing to do with marching and everything to do with malnutrition. In the face of this slow-motion collapse, the camp's medical practitionersmen like Hideo, the self-taught veteran, double down on their traditional wisdom. With no other options available, the demand for remedies, any remedies, becomes desperate. This is where the world of battlefield medicine moves from the merely questionable to the truly bizarre. You see things that defy all logic, potions and poultices born from a mixture of folklore, desperation, and sheer guesswork. It's a full-blown crisis, and everyone has a cure. A soldier suffering from the bloody flux is advised by a comrade to find and eat a charcoal-grilled newt. The belief is that the black, amphibious creature will absorb the blackness and poison from his gut. You watch the poor man dutifully hunt for a newt by a stagnant pool of water, his hands trembling with weakness as he tries to spear it with a sharpened stick. He cooks it over a small fire until it's a blackened crisp and eats it with a grim determination. It's a meal of pure magical thinking. Another common prescription for persistent coughs and lung ailments is dried snake gall, a tiny, intensely bitter organ that is ground into a powder and mixed with warm sake. It is eye-wateringly expensive, sold by the camp-following merchants who prey on the fears of the sick. A mainstream historical fact is that traditional Chinese medicine, which heavily influenced Japanese practices, included thousands of ingredients from the animal, mineral and plant kingdoms, many of which seem utterly fantastical today. Bear bile, powdered deer antler and scorpion wine were all part of a vast, complex pharmacopoeia, and soldiers on campaign would use whatever diluted, half-remembered versions they could find or afford. You see a man with a festering wound on his leg being treated with a paste made from crushed snails, shells and all, mixed with mugwort leaves. The logic, as it's explained to you, is that the snail's slime helps to regenerate flesh. It's a creative, if disgusting, theory. You also hear of a more extreme remedy for stubborn infections, maggots. An old soldier swears that if a wound is infested with maggots, you should leave them be, as they only eat the dead flesh and leave the living tissue alone. This is a truly quirky tidbit, as it happens to be one of the few folk remedies that has a basis in scientific fact, a practice known today as maggot debridement therapy. But here, in the mud and stench of the siege camp, it's not science, it's just a horrifying observation that sometimes, against all odds, the men whose wounds became fly-blown survived more often than those whose wounds were kept clean with ash and dirt poultices. Historians still argue about the psychological role of these bizarre remedies. Did anyone, even the practitioners, truly believe a grilled newt could cure dysentery? Or was the act of doing something, of seeking out an ingredient, preparing a potion, administering a treatment, a real medicine? Perhaps it was a way of creating a small bubble of agency in a situation where soldiers were utterly powerless against the forces of disease and malnutrition. It was a ritual to ward off despair, a tangible act of hope, however misplaced. One evening, a raw, burning pain begins in your own throat. You swallow, and it feels like you're swallowing shards of glass. Fear, cold and immediate, grips you. A simple sore throat could be the first sign of a dozen different deadly fevers. You try to ignore it, but by morning, it's worse. You can barely choke down your rice gruel. An older samurai in your unit notices your discomfort. He rummages in his personal kit and produces a small, dried piece of something that looks like leather. Dried toad skin, he says with complete confidence. Chew on this. It will draw out the fire. You look at the piece of desiccated amphibian skin. It is wrinkled, brown, and smells faintly of dust and old ponds. Every modern instinct you don't possess is screaming in protest, that the pain in your throat is real, and the fear is worse. You look at the man's earnest face. He is trying to help. To refuse would be an insult. With a deep sigh of resignation, you take the piece of toad skin and put it in your mouth. The texture is rubbery and vile. The taste is unspeakable. You begin to chew, your face contorting in a mask of disgust. Does it work? Of course not. But for a few minutes, the sheer, overwhelming awfulness of chewing on a piece of dried toad distracts you from the pain in your throat. And in this place, maybe that's the only kind of medicine that truly exists, a bigger misery to make you forget the smaller one. The foul taste of the dried toad skin eventually fades, but the sore throat lingers for days before finally receding on its own, leaving you weak but relieved. Your brief, personal dance with folk medicine is over, but it leaves you with a heightened awareness of every scent and sensation. And now you start to notice a particular smell that isn't the latrines, or the river, or the general camp decay. It's you. It's the deep, permeating stench of your own unwashed gear. It's an odor that has been building for weeks, a scent so constant that your brain had simply tuned it out. But now you can't ignore it. It's the sour, musky aroma of stale sweat, grime, and something else. Something uniquely metallic and organic. It's the smell of your armor. Your yoroi, your beautiful suit of armor, is no longer a symbol of your status and martial prowess. It is a portable bog. You run your hand over the silk cords, the intricate adoshia that bind the lacquered plates together. They were once brightly coloured, a vibrant testament to your clan's identity. Now they are stiff, dark, and matted with a combination of dirt, sweat, and perhaps even a few flecks of old blood from a training skirmish. They feel greasy to the touch. You can't simply throw them in the river to wash them. The water would ruin the leather components and could cause the lacquer to peel. Cleaning your armor is a painstaking, dry process, and you've had little time or energy for it. The real problem lies beneath the surface, in the parts you can't see. Underneath the hard lacquered plates is a layer of padding, usually made of hemp or cotton fabric stuffed with more plant fibers. This padding is designed to cushion the blows and make the armor bearable to wear. It also acts as a perfect sponge. Every drop of sweat you've produced over the past weeks of marching, waiting, and sleeping has soaked into that padding. It has never once had a chance to properly dry. It has just sat there, in the dark, warm space between your body and the armor, festering. It has become a thriving colony of bacteria and mildew, a miniature ecosystem of stink. A mainstream historical fact about armor maintenance is that samurai would ideally air out their armor in the sun and wind after every use and use powdered incense or aromatic woods to try and combat the smell. Little bags of fragrant herbs or camphor, like the ones you tried to use against the lice, were often placed inside the armor's storage box. But you are not at home in a peaceful castle. You are in a siege camp. Your armor doesn't go into a storage box. It lies on the floor of your hut next to your sleeping mat, or you sleep in it for warmth or in case of a night attack. There is no airing out. There is only accumulation. You decide you have to do something. The stench is becoming a point of personal dishonor. On a rare, dry, sunny afternoon, you painstakingly dismantle the main components of your cuirass. You lay the pieces out on a straw mat, exposing the inner linings to the sun for the first time in what feels like an eternity. The smell that rises from the sun-warmed padding is eye-watering. It's a thick, cheesy, sour odor, the ghost of 1,000 anxious moments and 1,000 miles walked. It's the most personal smell in the world, the essence of your own exhaustion and fear, fermented over time. You feel a strange sense of shame, as if this smell reveals a weakness you've been trying to hide. You take a stiff brush made of rice straw and begin to work at the grime on the silk cords and the visible parts of the lining. Dust, dried mud, and tiny flakes of unidentifiable crud fly into the air. It's a losing battle. You are just moving the dirt around. The deep-seated dampness and the smell that comes with it are impossible to remove. A quirky tidbit of samurai lore involves a warrior who was so fastidious that he would burn incense inside his helmet before battle. The idea was that if he were to be decapitated, his head, when presented to the enemy general for inspection, would have a noble and pleasant aroma. It was the ultimate act of vanity and preparedness. Looking at your own helmet, with its sweat-stained lining and the faint scent of old hair and oil, you think your head would probably smell like a rotten cabbage. It's a grimly amusing thought. Historians still argue about the practical impact of this constant state of unhygienic gear. Did it contribute significantly to skin diseases? Almost certainly. The constant contact with filthy, abrasive fabric would lead to chafing, rashes, and infections, turning the armor from a source of protection into a source of affliction. Another layer of misery, another constant drain on a soldier's health and morale. You are effectively wearing a disease-impregnated sponge strapped to your body for 12 hours a day. As the sun begins to set, you reassemble your armor. It's marginally cleaner on the surface, but you know the deep stench is still locked within its fibers, waiting to be reawakened by your body heat tomorrow. It's a part of you now, like a scar or a bad memory. You put on your simple night robe, a thin cotton kimono, and for a moment, you feel blessedly clean and unencumbered. But your armor sits there in the corner of the hut, radiating its faint, foul aura. It's not just an object anymore. It feels like a living entity, a partner in your suffering. It carries the history of your campaign in its very smell. It is the armor's aura, a constant, smelly reminder of where you are and what you have become. The siege becomes a grim, unchanging feature of the landscape. The castle on the mountain is a silent, stony testament to your army's frustration. The starvation strategy is working, but it's a slow, agonizing process for both the besieged and the besiegers. Morale in your camp is at an all-time low. The days are defined by crushing boredom, punctuated by the occasional skirmish when a desperate foraging party tries to break out of the castle. The nights are filled with the familiar sounds of sickness and the pervasive, inescapable smell of the camp. Your commander, a stern and pragmatic man, grows more and more concerned. He needs to break the stalemate, not just militarily, but psychologically. He needs to remind the enemy in the castle of the filth and despair that awaits them if they don't surrender. One morning, a new order comes down, and it is unlike any you have received before. It's not about sharpening spears or practicing formations. It is a work detail of the most disgusting kind imaginable. Squads of ashigaru are assembled, armed not with weapons, but with large wooden buckets and long-handled ladles. Their faces are a mixture of confusion and dread. They are marched, under guard, to the one place in the camp that everyone tries to avoid, the massive, overflowing latrine trenches. Their mission, you learn with a growing sense of disbelief, is to start emptying them. The process is a vision from a nightmare. The soldiers, their faces wrapped in rags that do little to block the stench, stand at the edge of the pits and begin to ladle the raw, semi-liquid human waste into the lines of buckets. The smell, which was already an oppressive cloud over the camp, intensifies into a physical force, so potent it feels like you could drown in it. Men are gagging, their shoulders heaving, but the samurai overseers are merciless. The work must be done. A long, disgusting bucket brigade is formed, passing the sloshing containers of human effluence from the trenches toward the front lines, closer to the base of the castle mountain. Your first thought is that this is some grand, desperate attempt at sanitation. Perhaps the commander has finally realized the connection between the overflowing pits and the sickness ravaging his army. Maybe they are moving the waste to a new, more distant location. But that hope is quickly dashed. The buckets are not being taken away. They are being collected. They are being weaponized. Night soil, the agricultural term for human fertilizer, is about to find a new and hideous purpose in the art of war. This is a gruesome, though not entirely uncommon, historical fact of siege warfare across many cultures. When traditional weapons failed, armies often turned to biological and psychological warfare. This could include launching diseased animal carcasses over castle walls or, in this case, using human excrement as a weapon. Its purpose was twofold: to spread disease and to shatter the morale of the defenders with sheer, overwhelming disgust. As evening approaches, the plan becomes clear. The buckets, hundreds of them, are brought to the catapults and trebuchets that have been constructed for the siege. These great wooden engines of war, designed to hurl massive stones to break down castle walls, are being repurposed. The soldiers load the buckets, not with stone, but with filth. This is a quirky and grotesque tidbit of military innovation. A new kind of ammunition. The catapult crews, their faces grim, go about their work. They have the worst job of all, handling the foul ammunition directly. Then, the commander gives the signal. With a great groan of twisted rope and straining wood, the catapults swing their mighty arms. The buckets fly through the air in a high arc, their contents trailing behind them like a brown, falconet's tail. They soar over the outer defences and smash against the castle walls and rooftops, splattering their horrific payload over stone, wood, and quite possibly any unlucky defender who happened to be on watch. Another volley follows, and another. It's a relentless, stinking bombardment. You can almost imagine the shock and horror of the men inside the castle, who are suddenly drenched in the concentrated waste of 10,000 of their enemies. Historians still argue about the true military effectiveness of such tactics. Did it actually spread disease in a meaningful way within the fortified, and likely already unsanitary, castle? Or was its primary impact psychological? The act of turning the very sky into a sewer, of raining down filth upon your enemy, is a profound act of dehumanization. It is an assault not just on the body, but on the spirit. It's a message that says, we will not just defeat you, we will drown you in our contempt. We will reduce you to the level of our own squalor. You stand on the siege line, watching the dark arcs fly through the twilight sky. There is no cheering, no triumphant shouts of victory. The men around you are silent, their faces illuminated by the flickering torchlight. There is a sense of grim satisfaction, perhaps, but also a deep, unspoken sense of degradation. To win, you have had to stoop to this. You have weaponized the lowest, most disgusting part of your own existence. The war is no longer about honor, or loyalty, or even territory. It has descended into a contest of filth. You look up at the castle, now streaked with the dark stains of your assault, and you feel a strange, hollow victory. You have succeeded in making your enemy's home as foul as your own. But in doing so, you have wallowed in that same foulness, embraced it, and made it your sword. The stench of the latrines, which once just polluted your camp, now hangs over the entire valley, a testament to how low you have all sunk. The war of filth continues for several more days. The catapults fling their vile ammunition, and the castle endures. But something has broken. A new banner appears on the castle walls, not a clan crest, but a stark white flag. A parley is called. The enemy lord, his face the pale mask of exhaustion and humiliation, agrees to surrender. The siege is over. It wasn't a final, glorious charge that won the day, nor the starvation. It was the toad skin remedies, the lice, the dysentery, the shallow graves, the sour armour, and finally, the trebuchets flinging excrement. You won by being more willing to endure and to inflict misery. A strange, hollow quiet descends upon the camp. The news spreads, not with roaring cheers, but with murmurs of exhausted relief. The campaign is over. You survived. You will be going home. The thought is so vast, so overwhelming, that it's hard to grasp. Home. A place with clean water, real food, a soft bed, and no pervasive, soul-crushing stench. But you're not there yet. The army has to pack up, the slow and arduous process of dismantling the wretched city you've built. As you roll up your sleeping mat and pack your meager belongings, you catch your own reflection in the polished surface of your helmet. The face that stares back is not the same one that left home months ago. It is gaunt, the skin tanned to leather, the eyes holding a weary, haunted look you don't recognize. The march home is different. The pace is lighter, the mood almost buoyant. For the first time in months, you are marching away from filth, not deeper into it. The journey takes you through rolling hills and past small villages, and then your commander announces a detour, a reward for his surviving men. You are stopping at a small town known for one thing, its onsen, its natural hot springs. The words send a ripple of pure joy through the ranks. A bath. Not a symbolic splash of gritty river water, not a quick scrub in a muddy stream, but a real, hot, cleansing bath. The town is nestled in a volcanic valley, and you can smell the faint, sulphurous scent of the springs on the air long before you arrive. It's the most beautiful smell you've ever encountered. The onsen is a series of large, outdoor pools, lined with smooth river stones and fed by a constant stream of steaming, mineral-rich water. Steam rises in thick clouds, shrouding the place in a dreamy, warm fog. The proprietor, used to dealing with weary travellers, is initially terrified by the sight of several hundred filthy, heavily armed soldiers appearing on his doorstep, but your commander pays him handsomely in silver, and the doors are thrown open. You strip off your armour for what feels like the last time, the stinking shell of your campaign life. You peel away your sweat-stiffened undergarments, layers of fabric that have become part of your skin. Standing naked in the cool air, you feel impossibly light. You look at your own body and see a road map of the last few months, the nicks and scars, the angry red marks from chafing armour, the dozens of tiny red dots from louse bites. You are a walking testament to poor hygiene. A mainstream historical fact is the Japanese love for bathing and cleanliness, which stands in such stark contrast to the realities of campaign life. The onsen was not just a place to get clean, it was a place for healing, socializing, and ritual purification. The therapeutic properties of the mineral water were believed to cure a host of ailments, from skin conditions to muscle aches. For you and your comrades, it is nothing short of a baptism. Before entering the main pool, you must perform the customary washing. You sit on a small wooden stool, dipping a bucket into a trough of hot water and pouring it over yourself. You are given a small, rough cloth and a piece of soap made from wood ash and oil. You scrub your skin with a ferocity that is almost painful, watching in amazement as layers of grime and dead skin peel away, turning the water that runs off you a dark grey. You wash your hair, scrubbing at your scalp, trying to exorcise the ghosts of the lice that made their home there. It is a long, meticulous process, a ritual of shedding the old, filthy self. Finally, clean for the first time in memory, you step into the main pool. The heat is a blissful shock. It seeps into your bones, loosening muscles that have been clenched for months. The sulphurous water feels slick and soft against your clean skin. You sink down to your neck with a groan of pure, animal pleasure. Around you, your comrades are doing the same, their faces, for the first time, relaxed and free of tension. The hardened warriors, men who have faced death and lived in squalor, are bobbing in the water like happy children. The tough, silent man next to you, who you've never seen smile, has his eyes closed and a look of absolute bliss on his face. It's a quirky, humanizing sight, a cohort of battle-hardened samurai, giggling and splashing in a giant hot tub. Historians still argue how much a single event like this could truly impact the long-term health of soldiers returning from a campaign. While the hot water would soothe muscles, and the soap would remove surface bacteria, it couldn't undo the damage of dysentery or cure the chronic diseases born of malnutrition. But that isn't the point. The healing that is happening here is more than just physical. It's a psychological cleansing. It's the act of washing away the filth, the degradation, the memory of the latrine trenches and the sour armour. It is washing away the war. As you lean your head back against a smooth, warm rock and let the steam envelop you, you feel the hard shell you've built around your soul begin to soften, just a little. For the first time in a very long time, you feel human again. The bliss of the onsen fades into a warm, pleasant memory as the army completes the final leg of its journey. The sight of your home province, the familiar hills and the silhouette of your lord's castle on the horizon. brings a feeling of profound relief, but it's a feeling tinged with a strange melancholy. The world you are returning to is the same one you left, but you are not the same man. You walk through the castle gates, not as part of a conquering horde, but as a quiet procession of weary survivors. Families rush out to greet their sons, husbands and fathers. There are tears and joyous reunions, but there are also the quiet, heartbroken faces of those whose loved ones did not return. You see Kenji's father, a minor official in the castle administration, looking for a face he will never see again. The small packet containing his son's hair and fingernail will be his only solace. In the days that follow, you slip back into the rhythms of garrison life. You are given clean quarters, fresh clothes and proper meals of fluffy white rice, grilled fish and crisp vegetables. The simple luxury of it all is almost overwhelming. You spend hours just sitting, savouring the feeling of clean silk against clean skin, the absence of a constant, maddening itch. You sleep on a thick futon, a deep and dreamless sleep, undisturbed by the sounds of coughing or the fear of a night attack. On the surface, you have recovered. You are clean, well-fed, and safe. Campaign is over, but the scars of that time are not all visible. You have the small, faded marks on your skin, but the deeper wounds are the ones no one can see. At dinner, you find yourself eating quickly, hunched over your bowl, a habit learned in the field where you never knew when you'd be interrupted. You catch yourself scanning the clean, polished floorboards of the corridor for things to trip on, a reflex born from navigating the treacherous, trash-strewn ground of the camp. These are the physical echoes of your time in the filth. The psychological ones are deeper. You find yourself standing for long moments by the well in the castle courtyard, just watching the clear, clean water being drawn up in buckets, a sight that still feels like a miracle. The smell of a nearby provi, once just a normal part of life, now triggers a fleeting, visceral memory of the vast, open trenches of the siege camp, and your stomach clenches. A mainstream historical fact is that what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder has always been a consequence of war, though it was never given a name. It was simply the soldier's heart, the thousand-yard stare, the unexplainable melancholy that haunted men long after the last battle was fought. Your trauma isn't just from the terror of potential combat, but from the slow, grinding degradation of the campaign itself. You talk with the other survivors, the men who shared the mud and the misery with you. You find a new, unspoken bond between you. You can make a dark joke about grilled newts or the smell of old armor, and they will understand in a way no one else ever could. It's a strange, exclusive club, and the membership dues were paid in lice, dysentery, and despair. This shared experience is a form of healing, but it also sets you apart. You see the fresh-faced young recruits, eager for their first taste of glory, and you see in their eyes the same naive romanticism you once had. You want to warn them, to tell them that war is not about heroic charges, but about trying to keep weevils out of your rice and finding a clean leaf to use in the latrine. But you say nothing. It's a lesson you can't teach. It can only be learned. Historians still argue about the long-term, societal impact of these unhygienic campaigns. How did the mass movement of diseased armies affect civilian populations? How many veterans brought chronic illnesses back to their villages, becoming a long-term burden on their families? The glorious chronicles of the warlords speak of territories gained and enemies vanquished. They don't record the quiet, lingering deaths from camp fever that occurred months after the army came home, or the lifelong ailments that plagued the survivors. The true cost of the war is never fully counted. One afternoon, you are cleaning your armor, preparing it for proper storage. You work in the bright, clean sunlight of the castle armory. You have boiled the silk cords and scrubbed the lacquered plates. You have meticulously oiled the leather. But as you handle the helmet, you lift it to your face and inhale, and there it is. Faint, ghostly, but unmistakable. The sour, musty smell of the campaign, the ghost of old sweat and fear, still clings to the deep fibres of the padding. You realize with a sinking feeling that you will never truly wash it out. It's a permanent stain, a scent that only you can detect. It is the aura of the battlefield, and a part of it will be with you forever. The war is over, the filth has been washed away, but some scars, both seen and unseen, can never truly be cleansed. They are the price of survival. The world of the samurai warrior, so often painted in strokes of noble sacrifice and exquisite artistry, was, as you have seen, built upon a foundation of mud and misery, a place where the most formidable enemy was often the one you couldn't see, the one that lurked in a simple drink of water or in the seams of your own magnificent armor. The glorious charge was a fleeting moment, but the daily grind of survival, the constant battle against filth and disease, was the true, unglamorous reality of a soldier's life. The line between spiritual purity and physical squalor was a chasm they walked beside every day. And now, as the image of that lonely, stinking helmet begins to fade from your mind, you can let go of the tension of that long-ago campaign. Feel the weight of your own clean sheets, the soft comfort of your pillow beneath your head. There is no sour armor in the corner of your room, no distant sound of coughing from a fevered comrade. There is only the quiet of your own peaceful space, the gentle hum of the world outside your window. Allow the last vestiges of that gritty, foul-smelling world to dissolve into the darkness, leaving behind only the deep sense of peace that comes at the end of a long, weary journey. Your own battle for the day is over, and you can surrender now to the soft, welcome embrace of sleep.